Back in 2010, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in the US was around $900. Nothing fancy, just a clean space, maybe a little dated, but livable. By 2015, that number crept up to about $150. Then by 2020, it hit $1,150. And today, in 2025, that same kind of apartment, no major upgrades, can cost anywhere from $1,800 to $2,500, depending on the city. And the thing is, your paycheck hasn't grown at the same pace, not even close. A man in his late 40s wearing 2 uniforms in one day told me recently, "I work 2 jobs. Why can't I afford a 1-bedroom?" And honestly, that question hit me harder than any chart or statistic ever could. Because he's not alone. Across the country, millions of people are asking that same question in different ways. Teachers, delivery drivers, nurses, grocery workers, even folks working in tech or education, people with steady income, college degrees, families, are struggling to keep up with rent. Not to get ahead, just to stay where they are. In this video, I want to have a real conversation, not about the economy in theory, not about policy as headlines, but about what it actually feels like to live through this moment, when housing has become so expensive that it feels like a luxury item instead of a basic right. We'll begin with the core mismatch that's left so many stuck in place. Wages that have barely budged in over a decade, while rent has surged. In many cities, rent has outpaced income by 3 or 4 times. A teacher in Austin might spend over 50% of their paycheck just to keep a roof over their head. That's not a sustainable way to live. That's surviving, not thriving. Then we'll talk about why the system is so jammed up, how local zoning laws, slow permitting processes, and community resistance, sometimes well-meaning, sometimes not, have made it almost impossible to build more affordable homes where they're needed most. In cities like San Francisco or New York, even modest multifamily projects are blocked or delayed for years. Meanwhile, corporate landlords swoop in, buy up what's left, and raise prices. It's not about greed alone, it's about power and the systems that let it flourish. We'll look at how this all lands hardest on younger generations. Millennials and Gen Z aren't lazy, they're exhausted. Delaying milestones like moving out, getting married, starting families, not because they want to, but because they simply can't afford to do otherwise. And inflation, high interest rates, and the echoes of the pandemic have only made it worse. Finally, we'll have to look at who's really holding the keys. Private equity firms, hedge funds, and real estate giants that bought up thousands of homes after the 2020 crash, transforming neighborhoods into investment portfolios. And while that was happening, what did our government do? In many cases, nothing. Solutions like zoning reform or rental assistance have been proposed, but too often they stall in the same place: politics. This isn't about blaming individuals. It's not about one bad mayor or one bad policy. It's about a system that has stopped working for the people it was supposed to protect. And the rent crisis? It's just the symptom we all see first. So as we go through this, I invite you not just to listen, but to reflect. What kind of country do we want to live in, where someone working full-time or even 2 jobs can't afford a safe place to sleep? Let's start with where so many people are right now, stuck in place, working harder than ever, and still falling behind. Ever feel like you're running on a treadmill, except someone keeps cranking up the speed and you're not getting anywhere? That's what the American housing experience feels like in 2025. Let's look at the numbers. From 2010 to now, average hourly wages in the US have grown by just about 35%. Meanwhile, rents have skyrocketed by over 90% nationally, and in some major metro areas, it's well over 120%. That gap isn't just a statistic, it's a trap. Take the story of Amanda, a public school teacher in Austin, Texas. She earns around $55,000 a year, which sounds decent, right? But her rent for a modest 1-bedroom apartment runs about $2,400 a month. That's more than 50% of her income, gone before she even buys groceries or pays for gas. She tutors after school and works weekends at a bookstore just to break even. This isn't just stressful, it's unsustainable. People like Amanda are constantly calculating, can I make rent this month If the car breaks down, do I fix it or pay the electric bill? There's no breathing room, no cushion, no time to think about the future because survival eats up all the energy. And I think that's what really breaks my heart. It's not just the financial strain, it's the psychological weight. Living paycheck to paycheck isn't just inconvenient, it's isolating. You start to blame yourself. You wonder if you made the wrong career choice or if you're just bad with money. But here's the truth. This isn't a moral failing. It's a structural failure. This idea that if you work hard, you'll be okay. That promise is cracking. We've built a system where wages, especially for working class Americans, have barely moved, but the cost of simply existing keeps climbing. Housing, healthcare, education, all rising, all faster than your paycheck can catch up. And it's easy to point fingers. Some folks say, well, just move somewhere cheaper or stop buying lattes. But that's not just out of touch, it's insulting. This isn't about personal choices. It's about an economy that's out of sync with reality. If you've ever skipped a dentist appointment because you couldn't afford both the bill and the rent, you know what I mean. This isn't about laziness. It's about being stuck in a system that doesn't reward effort the way it used to. And if you're tired of hearing, just work harder from people who haven't had to fill out a rental application in 15 years, trust me, you're not alone. So how did we get here? Let's zoom out and look at the system itself, the policies, the resistance to change, and the intentional choices that created this shortage of affordable housing in the first place. Because if we want to understand the crisis, we need to see the machinery behind it. What if I told you that the housing crisis isn't just the result of bad luck or poor personal decisions, but the outcome of a system built to bottleneck supply before you even have a chance? Let's start with zoning laws. In many American cities, especially older ones like San Francisco or New York, huge swaths of residential land are zoned for single-family homes only. That means you can't legally build apartments or multi-family units in most neighborhoods, even when the demand is clearly there. It's like trying to solve a water shortage with a leaky pipe and then banning buckets. And then there's the permitting process. You'd think cities desperate for more housing would be fast-tracking construction, right? But in reality, it can take years, sometimes over a decade, to get a new project approved. Paperwork, endless hearings, appeals, neighborhood opposition, it all slows everything down. Meanwhile, people are sitting on waiting lists or couch surfing, hoping for a break that never comes. One of the biggest invisible walls? NIMBYism, not in my backyard. Well-meaning residents, often longtime homeowners, show up at local meetings to oppose new housing developments. They say things like, it'll change the character of our neighborhood, or we need to protect property values. You know, I've been to some of those meetings, and I get it. Change is hard. But when fear of change means more families are priced out, something's not working. Let me give you a real example. In San Francisco, where the median rent for a one-bedroom is now pushing $3,000, plans to build multifamily units near public transit were delayed for years. Community opposition blocked the developments, citing traffic and neighborhood aesthetics. All while thousands of workers, teachers, nurses, hospitality staff, were commuting in from hours away just to keep the city running. And here's the kicker. Into this chaos step corporate landlords and investment firms. They know supply is tight, so they buy up existing homes, sometimes entire neighborhoods, and jack up the rents. Private equity firms like Blackstone and others have been doing this quietly for years, turning shelter into a portfolio asset. When you limit supply and boost demand, you create the perfect market for profit. And guess who pays? Regular people trying to build a life. And let's bust one more myth while we're here. The idea that you can just move somewhere cheaper. Sure, maybe a smaller city has lower rents, but often those cities don't have public transportation, job opportunities, healthcare, or schools at the same level. And as more people try to move there, the rents catch up fast. The affordability gap just shifts zip codes. This isn't just a policy failure. It's a system protecting those who already have, while locking out those trying to get in. So where does that leave us? Well, part of the answer lies in understanding who's really being hit the hardest, and how recent shocks like inflation and the pandemic have left entire generations struggling to catch up. Have you ever wondered why, even as the headlines say the economy's recovering, it still feels like you're falling behind? Let's talk about the hidden impacts, the quiet, lingering aftermath that's reshaping an entire generation's future in ways we rarely stop to name. For Gen Z and millennials, the idea of hitting traditional milestones, moving out, getting married, starting a family, buying a first home, has become less of a timeline and more of a wish list. A 27-year-old today might still be living with roommates or even back with their parents, not because they were lazy or unmotivated, but because rent on a one-bedroom in many cities eats up over 40% of their income. And that's before we even talk about inflation. Over the past few years, wages have barely budged, but rent, groceries, transportation, even used cars have all climbed. And here's the trap. High inflation pushed the Fed to raise interest rates, which made mortgages more expensive. That means even for folks who managed to save, buying a home isn't the ticket to stability it once was. You're stuck renting longer, and rents are rising too. It's like a treadmill that speeds up every time you think you're catching up. Let me share a story that hit home for me. A young couple I met recently in Phoenix, both in their early 30s, lost their service industry jobs during the pandemic. They burned through savings, picked up gig work, and even qualified for rent relief for a few months. But once that expired, they were behind again. Even now, both working full-time, they can't find a two-bedroom they can afford without cutting into food or health expenses. They told me, we didn't expect to be rich. We just thought we'd be okay. And that's the thing, people aren't asking for luxury, they're asking for livability. The pandemic didn't just hurt incomes, it also broke the illusion that things would automatically get better over time. We've come to realize that the system doesn't bounce back equally for everyone. Some folks bounce back quickly, especially those who already owned assets. But for renters, for people on hourly wages, for young families just starting out, recovery feels like watching a bus leave without you again. That's why it's important to name this for what it is, not a failure of individual effort, but a system that rewards ownership and punishes delay. And when we talk about solutions, we can't just throw around buzzwords, because that brings us to the next layer. How policy choices, both past and present, are shaping who gets to move forward and who's left holding the bill. What if I told you that the house down the street, the one you thought belonged to a family, was actually owned by a hedge fund? That's not a dystopian warning, that's 2020. During the pandemic crash, while millions of Americans were just trying to hold on to their homes or scrape by with unstable work, private equity firms and hedge funds were quietly buying up properties, fast and cheap. They saw an opportunity, and they moved fast. From 2020 to 23, companies like Blackstone and Invitation Homes scooped up tens of thousands of houses, especially in fast-growing markets like Atlanta, Phoenix, and Charlotte. Not to live in them, of course, but to turn them into rental assets, profit machines. Imagine this, the house you used to deliver newspapers to as a kid is now part of a financial portfolio. The couple next door, they're renting from a firm headquartered 3 states away, paying ever-increasing rent, with no local landlord in sight. And when something breaks, it's a call center, not a neighbor that takes the call, if they take it at all. This isn't just happening in theory. I recently met an elderly woman named Darlene in Tampa. She lived in the same modest home for over 40 years. After her husband passed, she stayed. The house was sold to a private equity-backed company she'd never heard of. In less than a year, her rent doubled. There was no lease renewal negotiation, just a take-it-or-leave-it letter. She told me, "I thought I could age here. Now I don't know where to go." That story crushed me, because Darlene's not alone. This trend is national, and it's accelerating. And where's the government? Well, stuck. Federal policymakers argue over ideology while legislation stalls. At the local level, reform efforts like upzoning, making it easier to build duplexes or triplexes in single-family zones, get drowned out by NIMBY resistance. Rental assistance programs? Often temporary or underfunded. And too many potential solutions, real ones, just gather dust on someone's desk because it's politically risky to take on big real estate money. Now, I don't think there's a silver bullet, but I do believe that if we want to change this, we have to start by seeing it clearly. We have to see the invisible hands that now own our neighborhoods. And we have to ask ourselves what kind of country we want to live in. One where housing is a right or just another asset class for Wall Street. And that question brings us to the heart of it all. What will it take to reclaim stability, dignity, and fairness for renters, homeowners, and future generations alike? Let's take a moment to breathe and really sit with what we've uncovered. Wages have flatlined while rents have soared. We're building too little, too slowly, and when we do build, it's often met with resistance. Inflation and high interest rates have made even modest rentals feel out of reach. And behind so many of these struggles are faceless investors turning our homes into profit centers while decision makers delay or deflect. But here's the truth. None of this is because people aren't working hard enough. It's not a failure of personal responsibility. It's a system-level crisis, one that affects us all, even if we don't see it right away. And if housing is a basic human need, something we all agree on, then why has it become a luxury? That's the question I hope stays with you. Because once we see the problem clearly, we can stop blaming ourselves and start asking better questions. Like, what can we do together? Start by sharing your story in the comments. Have you struggled with rent? Been priced out of your hometown? Seen your neighborhood change overnight? Tell us. This community is stronger when we speak up. Share this video if it resonated, if it made you feel seen, or if it made you think differently. You never know who might need to hear it. And if you can, support local housing justice groups. Even a small donation or a few volunteer hours can go a long way. Because change doesn't just come from Washington. It starts in living rooms, community boards, and yes, comment sections, just like this. We can't fix this system overnight. But if we talk about it, if we organize, if we care, we can start. And that might be the most powerful thing we can do right now.